Hey there, welcome to Startup Steroid. I'm really excited to share this new video series with you today because this video series really captures a new and very exciting model for starting new companies. This story is about Launch Factory, and they're essentially what we call a startup studio. Which means they go through the ideation process, recruitment process, and incubation to really launch new and very innovative companies that have all the resources they need to really grow very, very quickly. So it's really taking that startup model, the traditional model, and turning it on its head. And we wanted to share that journey with you. Fair warning, this company is fundraising. Launch Factory is fundraising right now, and we are investing. And if you're interested in joining Launch Factory, please get in touch with us. My email address is on screen. Feel free to shoot me an email. And we also have all of the links for us as well as the folks at Launch Factory that you can get in touch with them directly if you'd like. Having said all of that, let me just give you a quick background on the video series. The video series is essentially 6 videos. The first 3 are of the principles of Launch Factory. The first 2 are the 2 co-founders, Brad Chisum and James Hereford. Both of those guys are brilliant. They've had very successful careers in their own right, and now are partnering to really start Launch Factory. And the third interview is with Kim King. Kim is, again, has an amazing background and is very experienced in the startup world. So you can hear her story as well. She's relatively new to the team. She's been an advisor for Launch Factory for quite some time, but now she's actually joining the team and also becoming a partner in the upcoming fund. So that's a really interesting interview. And then the next 3 interviews are of 3 companies that they've already started. So the first company they started in 2019. And again, that company is already surpassing all expectations and is growing very, very rapidly. And the next 2 companies they started in 2020 this year. And both of those CEOs are also brilliant. So you'll get to meet them in this video series. Having said all of that, if you are interested in joining Launch Factory, investing in them directly, if you are interested in any of the 3 portfolio companies, please feel free to get in touch with me or anyone at Startup Steroid if you're interested. And we also have the LinkedIn profiles and contact information for Launch Factory directly. So you can click on them, connect with them over LinkedIn, or you can send them an email or a message directly. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Having said all of that, let's get into the video series. Here's the first interview with Brad Chisum. Hey, Brad, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited. I spent the day with your whole team, got to know everybody. We've had a conversation before that's already in the archives, but I want to sort of just rehash some of those things and learn about your background, learn how you started Launch Factory, and what the plans are. So let's get into that a little bit. Tell me, just remind us about your background and how you sort of started Launch Factory.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I started off life as an engineer, coming out of undergrad. That's what brought me to San Diego. And I was in the semiconductor industry. So in the semiconductor industry, fabs have a bad habit of closing down and going out of business. And so that's what happened. So I had to choose between relocating to Phoenix, which I was from El Paso, so I could handle Phoenix weather, right? Or I could go do R&D at the Navy. And so I thought that would be pretty cool. And so here I'm doing R&D at the Navy. They have this semiconductor facility, and I got to use all these really cool equipment, do really cool projects, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it because deep inside, I was a closet entrepreneur, and I really wanted to go start a business, and I had no idea how. I knew nothing about business, and this started to become obvious to me because I'd come up with what I thought was a good idea, and then you look into it a little bit, and I'd realize, I don't even know how to look into this idea. So I started working on an MBA at night.
Okay.
And this was pretty good because what I was able to do was, do this at night, figure out what I wanted to do. But then more than that, I found this one technology at the Navy that I really liked. And I talked to the inventor. It turns out he had entrepreneurial ambitions himself. And so what I was able to do was in all my class projects, they factually let me use that technology as the class project. So use the MBA program as an incubator, right? So business plan writing class, did a whole business plan around that. Did every class I could use this technology, and then we ended up licensing that from the Navy, and that ended up being my first startup company. So we licensed that technology from the Navy. We built the company up, and ultimately were acquired by Google in 2014. And it was this big roller coaster, right?
Right.
Things went well, things went terrible. We almost went out of business, and we succeeded. So almost every startup company has that story.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go back and look at it, there were a lot of things that could have gone the other way, right? Like it was luck as far as I was concerned, and that. Well, I knew I wanted to go do another startup company, but I wanted to do it in a way where that luck. Can you make it more intentional? Is there something we can do? Can we understand what makes those things happen, and then be more intentional about it? And so a lot of that is the inspiration behind Launch Factory, because when you start looking at what it takes to make a successful company, or the negative version of it, why do startup companies fail?
Right.
They fail for common reasons, and they fail for common reasons that are preventable in many cases. And so this is where the vision for Launch Factory started to emerge. And
by the way, sorry to cut you off, but that's a huge realization, right?
Oh,
that
yeah.
companies fail, and they fail for a common reason. So talk to me a little bit about that. That obviously is from your experience starting your own company and being successful over the course of a few years and going through all of the twists and turns. But what was that aha moment like?
So it's one of these things. So both Richard, he was a co-founder. Both of us, engineering backgrounds. Of course, I had switched over to the business side of the equation. But when you're thinking about your business as the engineers, the tech guys, you keep thinking about the technology, right? Like, how are we going to develop it? Like, what are the limitations? How do we address those? You're very technology focused because you have it in your mind that once you figure out the technology, then the business stuff will just happen. Now you go look at the reality of the situation. There's a number of times we could have gone out of business.
Right.
Never was it because of the technology. It was always because of something on the business side, right? And it happened a lot, right? And if you look at the things that really made a big difference for us, they were things that were on the business side. So it's not that the technology didn't matter, but what it is that if you're only focused on the technology, you're going to miss all of these problems on the business side that absolutely have to be addressed.
Right.
And so it's when you start looking at it, and I think for people that are business people, it's probably fairly obvious. I mean, if you have a startup business, if it's not going to succeed, it's probably going to not succeed for business reasons, right? So, but for me, that was a big realization, and I think for a lot of tech entrepreneurs, that is a realization. And then, of course, I went and you go do some research on this, and you find that the data says, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
You look at why startup companies fail, and it's almost never because of the technology.
Yep.
And you look at what the differentiators are of the ones that succeeded versus the ones that didn't. It's best technology doesn't always win. In fact, I would say it doesn't even usually win.
Yeah.
It should. But there's these other important factors that are on the business side.
Right.
And that's what at Launch Factory, our goal is, let's think of ourselves as an entity that creates technology businesses with a underline under the word business, right?
Right.
So that's But it was a realization that took place over time. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like one day I realized this, but it was. As you reflect, you start looking at things. And for me, it started with realizing the certain individuals that were outside of my previous company's circle that actually were the ones that came in and were the big difference makers. So if it started off as more of an exercise of appreciation for certain individuals, and then you start realizing, wait a minute, there's quite a few of these.
Right.
And on top of that, what if you look at what they did? they weren't people that walked in with an idea for our technology, right? They are people that walked in with an idea for a business problem we had, and they knew how to solve it.
Right. No, that's fantastic, and the sort of visualization in my head always is that if you have a train conductor, he can get you to any destination you want, but you need the train conductor. If you don't have it, you're done. You're not. You're never going to move. So that, to me, that's what it is. That's sort of the skill set that you need in a business, and you can have it in the business as a CEO or someone who understands the business end of it, or you can have it as advisors. I think that you stated, right, that you sort of experienced. So tell me so now you're sort of forming Launch Factory with the idea of bringing those advisors into the company. So tell me sort of how that sort of vision came to fruition, and how you put all of those pieces together.
So, yeah, so one of the things, if you look at what these business problems are that can, cause, be devastating to companies, they're diverse in nature, right? Yeah. So you need a range of expertise. They can be industry specific, right? So it's not just, is it a finance question or go to market question. It's very much has to do with the business itself, and it's not always obvious who the person's going to be that has the solution, because sometimes this is through network contacts. So it's not necessarily, you can't always associate it with their job title.
Right.
So what you need is a network of people that, so people that are experienced, people that know how to achieve, that also have their own network contacts, and you have to keep them informed. And that keeping them informed is a big part of it, right? So, because we were able to break it down to the big difference makers for us, as in my previous company, there were 3 ingredients. They were motivated, they were interested in solving the problem. They were capable, so they had the ability to solve the problem. But most importantly, they were informed. They were aware of the problem. And the reason why that's most important is the biggest impacts are when the business in question doesn't even necessarily know what questions to ask or what help to ask for.
Yep.
But the person that understands on the outside, using their experience and knowledge, are able to propose a solution.
Right.
So and so that's where, by having this network at Launch Factory, where we have a bunch of people that are part of our organization, they're already bought in, so they're motivated. They want to help our companies, right?
Right.
And they're participating, right? These aren't passive, these are active people that are involved with us. We select people that have a wide range of capabilities when you add us all together, right? So you never know at what point someone's particular skills are going to be useful. But we operate as a network, and the network is kept informed, and by doing that, the solutions can come.
Right. Absolutely, and that's such an important thing to also realize, that it's the network, it's the village, not just one person, right?
Right.
And having that village around any company, that's what's really going to make you succeed. So that's fantastic. So in the first 2 years, you guys started in 2018, but let's say 2019 and 2020, when you actually had the three companies in total form. What was the mindset going in? Because we've gone through the specific with James and with some of the other people about, the ideation process, the recruitment process. In your mind, what were you trying to achieve throughout that process? I want to understand the big picture also.
Yeah, well, it's, of course, all this goes down to how do you improve startup company success rates, right? So that's kind of at the heart of everything. So one big piece of that, if you think about who the most important people are, if you're the entrepreneur, the most important people in your career path there are the people that allowed you to start, right? So the initial funding source. They're the ones that were willing to place the bet, make this happen, so that you as an individual can live your dream of being a co-founder of a startup company.
Right.
And that's always how I had my first round friends and family investors, and when you're in the role, there'll be moments where you kind of realize, hey, I'm getting to run a tech startup company. This has been my dream forever.
Yeah.
Why was I able to do that? It's these first round investors.
Yep.
And at the same time, often you end up on the opposite sides of the table with the investors, where you're negotiating, right? You're negotiating the terms of the investment. You're doing all of these things, when really you should be on the mission together.
Right.
And so with Launch Factory, because we moved the initial investors to the same place as bringing the founders in time, right? So they're all coming together at once, and all the terms and everything are pre-negotiated. Then our investors are now on the same side of the table. At least our initial investors, right, are on the same side of the table as our founders, and then therefore they also get to become part of the network that gets kept informed to help out our companies, but not just one company, but any of the companies in the portfolio.
Right.
So it's really trying to get this alignment.
Yeah.
Where we're all part of the same mission. We all win if the company is successful. Right. So how do we structure that in a way where we're all aligned and you don't have any tug of wars going on at the beginning? And so that was a big piece of why we structure ourselves the way we do.
Yeah.
The other piece is one of the biggest causes of failures for early stage startup companies is they don't do their due diligence. They go after a given idea because of emotional enthusiasm as opposed to objective reasoning. Right. They didn't really take time to understand the market. And so there's people that get it right because they have sufficient expertise or maybe a little bit of good luck.
Yep.
But so often companies don't get it right.
Right.
So we needed to make sure that we've done the proper due diligence on any idea before we move on with it, right? Before we move forward with it. And so one of the challenges, if you are a traditional incubator or an angel group, one of the challenges they have is performing that due diligence. They'll all agree that the due diligence is important.
Right. But
if you're going to go look at 200 companies a year, how do you do the thorough due diligence on 200 companies per year?
Right.
And so we decided instead of trying to do due diligence on anybody that comes in front of us, instead we're going to look at the ideas independently, go really deep on the due diligence of the individual companies, and then move forward with them and find the right leadership to lead those companies. So it's also separating. The way we look at it, the way we select our founders is also due diligence. You're doing due diligence on the people, but we're separating that from the idea so that we can keep our focus on making sure that we get the idea right and then we get the people right.
Right.
And not try to merge the two together.
I think that's such a huge insight also because, as investors, we look for the best jockeys, right? And we know that they can succeed. They're going to run through walls if we ask them to. So that's great, but now let's give them the best ideas, right? And if you can find the best jockey and the best idea, you have a winning formula, right? So you guys sort of figured that out instead of trial and error. Let's do this more sort of thoughtfully and intentionally. So I love that. That's fantastic. Let's take this a little bit further because now you have the best idea, best best jockey to execute on that idea. Now you're in the sort of the incubation phase, right? So the first company now, they've been with you for over a year now, almost a year and a half. The two other companies have been with you for a few months. What's that process like, and how are you sort of iterating on that? So come 2021, that'll be your third time around.
Yeah. So one thing I told Rupak Doshi, the CEO of our first company, one thing I told him on his first day, I told him that it was my objective that he gets the worst of our incubation as OmniSync. and so part of that was to be funny, but part of it was also I was being sincere with the idea that we're going to get better at our incubation over time. Yep. And as the first company, he's going to be the one that he and Norman are going to be the ones that we're doing most of our learning on, right? Right. And then but they've been great about it, right? So what we do is we take a lot of feedback from our companies and we ask them, is this working for you? Right. Is this beneficial? And so then we use that to incorporate on how we operate. But one of the biggest differences of the way we do incubation versus most incubators is we're extremely hands-on. We get very involved. Now, we don't control, and that's important because there are other startup studios, we're a startup studio model. There are others that do this model that will also influence, put a lot of control over the companies. Right. And the problem with that is if you have somebody that's willing to be controlled, they probably don't have the correct entrepreneurial mindset. Right. Because an entrepreneur needs to be willing to move forward even without guidance, they need to be
Right.
willing to move forward when we have conflicting guidance. If they have to be told what to do, then they're not
They're
ready
an
yet to be an
employee,
entrepreneur.
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So we get involved, but we don't have control. We actually don't have control. They have the majority of the equity. They have the majority of the voting rights, and we make sure to remind them of that on a regular
Right.
basis. We're also reminding ourselves of that on a regular basis because there's temptation, right?
Right.
Oh no, they're going the wrong way. So we work with them and we talk. We make it very much. It's a team effort.
Right.
But like I meet with each company usually about at least 2 hours a week each. James does even more than that, and we try to work with them on ways that are specifically helpful to them.
Right.
And one of the things I do, I meet with each one of the CEOs just a one-on-one, and that time actually has nothing to do with their business. That time is just for me to serve as the sounding board and coach on how to think like a CEO. And the business I ran before might be very different than the business they're running now, and maybe I don't even impart any real wisdom into the scenario, right? But I can be that sounding board for them.
Right.
Right, and I can listen to the problems they're having, and sometimes just having that trusted person to listen to what you're talking about can be really valuable in terms of shaping how you behave in your role. So
Right.
so that's the kind of nature of the support we provide. It's hands-on. We get involved, but then we're really big on utilizing our network. So knowing what to do and being able to do it will only get you so far.
Right.
You also need to be able to connect with the people and the entities that are actually going to appreciate what you're doing, and if they're a customer, be willing to pay for those services. Or if they're a service provider or potential partner, be willing to engage with you. And so we also play a very active role in the network outreach.
Fantastic. Yeah. So to me, it almost sounds like you provide the sort of the guide rails, right? So to the extent they're moving down the path and they're going, great, keep them going. But to the extent you see any pitfalls, that's when you can sort of, push them back in or something to that effect. Does that capture it?
It does. Now we do always emphasize, while we think we know a lot here at Launch Factory, there's also a lot of things we don't.
Right.
So so we're not. So we always encourage the founders to make sure they need to make the best decision based off their judgment, because on day one we start off, we probably know more about their business than they do because we've done all this due diligence work.
Right.
That changes very quickly.
Right.
After the first month, then they probably know the same amount we do, if not a little bit more. And then certainly 2 or 3 months in, now they know more about the business than we do. And so you have to respect the fact that now that they've been working on this longer, their expertise has likely surpassed ours, and that's just going to continue over time. Right. So what you'll see is the nature of the guidance we give our companies over time becomes not distant, but it becomes a little bit less specific in terms of what we think they should do as a business.
Right.
Because we've already we know that they probably already figured this out, but that doesn't mean we can't be a really strong resource for them.
Right.
And it also doesn't mean when they come across new areas that they need to explore, right? Like maybe they want to investigate a new pricing model, or maybe they're thinking about taking their product into a different marketplace and they haven't done the due diligence over there.
Right.
Then in those times we can start becoming more specific again.
Absolutely.
In what we do. Now, when I say we isn't me all
Right.
the time. I mean, certainly I participate, but there's the daily team here at Launch Factory, and then it's also all of the advisors. And so each one of our companies gets 3 dedicated portfolio company advisors.
Yep.
We look at where does that business need the most benefit? What are the holes in the founding team that we can plug with the skill set of an advisor, and then we reach out to find the best advisors we can for them. And so and the other thing we do is those advisors, they're compensated by participating in Launch Factory's carry, so they
Right.
participate in the Launch Factory side. The founders aren't diluted by taking this advisory
Exactly.
support. This is important because all companies will always benefit by having strong advisors early in their early days. The early days is probably when it matters the most.
That's when you need them.
At the same time, that's when dilution matters the most too from your
Right.
from your cap table. And so we just remove that burden from the founders. They don't need to worry about trying to negotiate with these advisors or anything else. We already have our own compensation. We take care of that for them, and the advisors can focus on advising the companies, and the founders can focus on getting the advice that they need.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean the advisory concept is such an important thing, that you have this stable of amazingly successful people who are sort of guiding your entrepreneurs from day one, right? Because there's no way other startups get that benefit. And the fact that these companies are part of Launch Factory, they have this amazing team of people looking after them. I think that in itself is worth the investment. But I think that's great. So let's talk about the advisors a little bit more, because I want to explore this going forward. Now, so initially, you had one company, 3 advisors, great. Now you have two companies. You're adding 2 companies this year. Next year you'll have 4 more companies. So, what's the plan on getting additional advisors? What does your thinking look like? Because now, if you're thinking about 3 advisors each, it could be up to 12 advisors. Obviously, if there's any crossover, that's a different story. But how are you thinking about recruiting those advisors, attracting them to Launch Factory, having them stay engaged in the process also? Tell me a little bit about that.
Advisor engagement is really important, right?
Yep.
But it's the first part of how do we find them? So there's really a couple of things that we have kind of going on in parallel. So one is we have our existing people that work with us that are available to advise, right? But we haven't necessarily identified who they're advising, but we know their skill sets.
Right.
So this means that when a company is ready, when we've worked with them and we've started to decide, okay, this is what they need, we can look at our existing group of advisors to see if there's any immediate fits. One of the things that's important is that the founders get to select the advisors, and the advisors get to select the founder. It's a two-way choice. Nobody's forced to take an advisor they don't want.
Gotcha.
And an advisor is not forced to advise a company.
So it's not like
want.
you're assigning that.
Right.
You talk to
that
him.
wouldn't work,
Yeah.
right? Everyone has to be completely motivated and interested, and so. But then what we do is not all that different than say like any job search, right? So we write a description of the characteristics we're looking for out of an advisor, and we put that out to our advisory network. Because in Launch Factory, we have advisors too, right? So so we put that out, and we use that to say, okay, well, who meets these criteria? And if we don't find somebody, usually we'll find somebody pretty quickly that way.
Right.
But if that doesn't work, well, then we keep persisting. It's amazing what you can do with LinkedIn outreaches and everything else. I mean, so the goal is, each company, when they're looking at who they should have, if they have 3 advisory positions open, they probably should go interview on the order of 21, 24 different people that have been pre-selected. To get to those roles, and so of course we always encourage the founders to do their own outreach.
Right.
And so what you'll see at least with all of our existing companies, and I imagine that this will continue for most of our companies in the future. They may have 2 advisors that Launch Factory brought to the table, but they have one that they found on their own. And that's we really encourage. We try to help bring in advisors with our network because we think we can achieve a higher quality that way, and we think we can save time.
Right.
But we're not suggesting that this is a situation where the founders just wait and see how it goes, right?
Right.
They should always play an active role, and they all do. And that actually puts them in a better position to judge the fit with the founders that we're bringing to the table. And so it's been really great. It's also been good for Launch Factory because some of the talent that our companies have brought in as advisors are like, wow, this is great.
Absolutely, it's always great when your entrepreneurs surprise you, right?
Oh yeah, well, and the ones we have, they all do, right? And so it's but that's where they were carefully chosen to begin with. So even though they do things that surprise us, the fact that they do things that surprise us isn't a surprise.
Right.
So
Right. That's great. Yeah, and this is such a fantastic story that now I'm putting all the pieces together. The best jockey, the best idea and now a village full of advisors who are sort of best in their field to guide them. So that's a winning formula, in my opinion. So that's fantastic. Let's talk. We'll talk pretty high level about what you're trying to do in 2021 and the next 4 years. In fact, because next 4 years, obviously, you're being much more ambitious. You're launching 4 companies a year, so the difficulty also goes up significantly. So, what's the plan for 4 years, 16 companies? In your mind, how do you sort of envision that going?
Yeah. So first, I would say that is our plan, but it's also our baseline plan. So you'll actually see us go above 16 companies over the next 4 years.
Okay.
But what we do, the way we look at things here, if you want to know, how much more or how do we decide to grow more, we have 4 pillars here at Launch Factory. So the fundamental things that we do that we need to execute in a high quality way, and we have to be firmly convinced that we can do that for the number of companies we have. And if we can't, then we won't grow. So the 4 pillars are, the incubation. How many companies can we incubate in a quality way? And a lot of this has to do with advisor talent, but even has to do with other things like the amount of office space we have, right? Like it's so how many can we do in a high quality way? How many good ideas can we source? Because we're not going to give great people with a bunch of resources a mediocre idea. I mean, they'll fix it, but that goes against what we're trying to do.
Right.
We want to give really good people a really good idea. So how many can we reliably and consistently get?
Right.
Then there's the founders themselves. This is the most important one. If we are hitting our limit on being able to source talent, well, then that's not okay. So we need to be convinced that we will reliably get the number of founders we need to start that number of companies. And then the 4th one is the funding. Right, we need to be confident that we are able to secure the funding that we need to get to those companies. And the funding one is probably if you never want to say it's easy, but if we have it nailed on the other 3, then the funding will happen.
Yep.
But you need to be able to show investors that we've nailed it on those other 3, and that's why the growth is justified.
Absolutely. This is fantastic. Before, I want to talk way more about funding and about actually what you're trying to achieve with it, but that has to be on our private site. We're not allowed to market, as you know. So if the investors are watching, they're welcome to log in and view that information. But before we wrap it up, do you have any other thoughts, sort of parting thoughts for people who are watching about Launch Factory and about the next 4 years?
So, the way I like to think about things at Launch Factory, we're trying to bring innovation to the way startups are created. And it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Like you think of, startups are famous for bringing innovation into the world.
Yeah.
But the way startups come to be has really been relatively stagnant. There's been some great things you've seen on the funding side, right? Like you now have crowdfunding, and there's been some movement there that should have happened earlier. But the way that companies come to be to begin with has been relatively stationary. And it's our vision, our goal, to bring innovation to the way startups are created that'll then turn into greater value for the investors, greater innovation from our startup companies.
Yep.
One of the tragedies in my mind, this is part of my technical side coming in, but one of the tragedies is when you see really great innovation get stuck on the shelf someplace or never make it to the marketplace because the business didn't execute.
Yep.
And if we can be part of reducing that waste and making things more productive, then we've accomplished our mission.
Absolutely. That's fantastic mission, and I wish you all the luck. And thank you so much for having us today in your offices, allowing us to meet with your whole team, and spending this time with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you so much for watching that interview with Brad Chisum. He's fantastic, and his whole team is great. If you're interested in investing in Launch Factory, or if you have any questions for Brad or for myself, please send me an email. My email address is on screen. We'll be happy to communicate back to you any answers that you might be looking for. If you're looking for more information about the fund that they're raising, please log in as an investor on startupsteroid.com, and we'd be happy to share that information with you also. And last but not the least, if you want to continue learning more about Launch Factory, go to the next video, which is James Hereford. He is the co-founder and COO of Launch Factory. And we really get into all of the nitty gritty with him in this interview. So make sure you check that out, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.